Well, good afternoon, folks. My name's Ngaire Woods. I'm Dean of the Blavatnik School of Government at the University of Oxford. And today we have 45 minutes to think hard about government rewired. The promise of rewiring government is huge. It's been discussed right across Davos this year, that AI can transform the way that any organization does its own work and delivers to its customers, clients, citizens. We've seen across the world, in the country in which I'm based, at Oxford University in Oxford, that supermarkets have data on every single person in the local community. They can tell you which 10 families are in need, and yet government is using a clunky old system designed 20 years ago to deliver benefits that are not flexible. We're going to hear today from people from different countries who have overcome those problems, and we're going to hear how to do that. But I'm going to start by inviting a man I'm sure known to you all as a prominent Oxford University alumni, but you might be interested also to know that he was once Britain's Prime Minister. He's the founder of the Tony Blair Institute and a leading voice in how to get governments rewired. Mr. Blair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I was, as I said to you, my academic career at Oxford was not very distinguished, frankly, so I don't think they celebrate me much as an alum. But it's great to be with you. So my very simple thesis is that how government understands, masters and harnesses the technology revolution is the single biggest thing for government to get its head around today. And the challenge is a very, very simple one, because my institute we work in roughly 45 countries now and helping governments make change. And a couple of years ago, I got the institute to do an analysis of the 19th century industrial revolution and how long it took politics and government to catch up with the fact that in the real world, this revolution was going on. And even allowing for the fact that life moves much quicker today, it took them a long time. And the challenge, therefore, is for a lot of political leaders and a lot of governments, they kind of, yes, okay, they can see in theory it's important, and they're trying to get their heads around it in certain areas. But I still don't think the political class, the governing class systems have fully internalized just the fundamental nature of this change. And it comes at a time when, if you're a developed country today, your biggest problem, which is why political disruption is happening, is that people think government's spending a lot of their money, government's taxing them quite highly, and the outcomes are quite poor. And if you're from the younger generation and you're used to being empowered in relation to what you do, you find government also very paternalistic, very top-down, very bureaucratic, and occasionally impenetrable. So that's the challenge for the developed world. The challenge for the developing world is that people's expectations, again, are very high, and they want to accelerate development. So you can say, look, in 30 years' time, we'll develop faster, but right now, people want change. So this is the challenge both for the developed world and the developing world. The instrument in their hands that can solve this challenge is the technology revolution. Because I think you will hear from what is a very distinguished panel, the good news is that this instrument will, if properly utilized, transform everything. Now, I don't mean to say there aren't downsides with the technology revolution and technology. A lot of it's general purpose technology, okay? So it can always be used for bad as well as good. But the fact is it should transform healthcare. It should transform the way we educate. It should transform, because government's all about process in the end and about permissions, about things like procurement. It should transform all of these things because you're going to be able to use artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI particularly, to make changes and to improve efficiency in a way that then allows you to spend less, tax less, but deliver greater efficiency. At least that's the holy grail that people should aim for. And it allows you, if you're a developing country, not to have to put in place all the legacy systems that you can see in the Western countries, but actually to circumvent them altogether. I mean, in the UK today, we would never create the National Health Service as it is now if we were in today's world. We have a different type of service because of what technology can do. So, and you can see, and there are examples actually, UAE, for example, Togo, for example. There are countries, Singapore, India, Estonia, Rwanda, Kenya. Some of the countries my institute is working on, they're already doing amazing things. But we're literally only at the foothills of this revolution. So anyway, this is what you're going to hear today. And I think the problem for governments will be partially one of understanding and partially one of capacity. Because the other problem is, I do not think there is any point in trying to hand all of this over to existing bureaucracies and civil services and say, sort it all out. A lot of it requires deep specialist knowledge, and there's got to be a completely new relationship between private and public sector where we're harnessing a lot of the expertise and ability that resides in the private sector. But just to finish on this, you know, often when I have a conversation with the political leaders we work with, and they'll say about this technology revolution, they say, well, is it a good thing or a bad thing? And I say to them that is honestly a redundant argument. Yeah, it's a good thing, and it can also be a bad thing. But the point is, it's a thing. In fact, in my view, it is the thing. So if that is true, and it is the real world revolution that's happening, we should try. The public sector will always be slower than the private sector to catch up, but we should at least try to accelerate that process of catching up. And the great benefit for political leaders is that whereas at the moment, political leaders who are incumbents are finding it really struggling, really hard to win elections, having been elected to win again, if they use this instrument properly, the benefits will not just be for the country, but they'll even be political as well. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful panel. I wish you well. And
thank you very much. Mr. Blair. So Mr. Blair has laid out some of the promise and some of the challenge of adopting new technologies in government. What we can certainly see in lots of industrialized countries is three big fears. The first is competition. They don't want to be beholden to one company who has a monopoly over all the government. But nor does it work to have a different company doing your digitization in each different ministry, because then you create silos and you lose the benefits of being in one. Second thing they're worried about is privacy and surveillance and how you control and support the liberty of citizens. And the third thing they're worried about, of course, is encroachment from overseas, from foreign powers, how vulnerable a government rewired might be. And those fears are paralyzing governments into a defensive crouch in many countries. So we're seeing not even minimal, where we're seeing some sort of veneer digitization, as you might say, rather than a fundamental rewriting of how government delivers. But today, on this panel, we've got some people who have fundamentally rewritten, and I'm sure you're as excited as I am to hear how. And I'm going to start by moving to Cina Lawson, who's sitting on my left, Minister of Digital Economy and Transformation in Togo. During COVID, Togo managed something extraordinary, something that many wealthy countries didn't. It managed to use digital to get benefits to the people who really needed them during COVID. So, Cina, tell us how did you make it happen?
So, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So COVID was a huge opportunity for us because it enabled us to build a platform to distribute digital cash to the poorest of the Togolese. So when the pandemic started, we wanted to implement mobility restriction measures like everybody else, but we knew that we had to find a way to support the poorest individuals because every day they needed to go out to earn their living, and we were restraining their movements. So in no time, really, because it took less than 10 days, we built a platform to give financial aid through mobile payment. So that was something very innovative at the time, and it enabled us to do two things. Number one, to pay directly cash to 25% of all Togolese adults. And the way we did it is that it wasn't through building an application, because most of the individuals we targeted didn't have smartphones. They didn't have access to the internet. Not that the internet was not there, but their phones would not access the internet. So we had to build a USSD platform, a short code, and we asked them to register onto the platform using their voters' IDs, because it was biometric IDs. And the beauty of it is that from registering onto the platform to receiving money, it took less than 2 minutes. And I think in our history, it was the first time that the government would say, you're going to receive cash, and in less than 2 minutes, you would receive it directly to your phone. So that was number one, and very important, because it also helped us to build trust and to be relevant again, because like Mr. Blair said earlier, we face tremendous challenges, and one of these challenges is to remain relevant in an environment where people are more and more demanding. So that was one thing. We used mobile payment to distribute cash. But the second question was, that was in early 2020. But then the question for us was, we did not know how long the pandemic was going to last, so we had to find ways to be very efficient in prioritizing beneficiaries. And so we used artificial intelligence in partnership actually with Berkeley, the University of Berkeley. We used artificial intelligence to do two things. Number one, we used satellite imagery to draw a poverty map of Togo so that we would know the range of revenues for each neighborhood of the country. So we had a map of all the revenues earned by the Togolese. So that enabled us to answer question number one, which is, where are the poorest individuals? Then question number two was, who are they? And then we used another algorithm. This time we applied it to cell phone metadata to have the phone numbers of people the machine identified as being the poorest of the Togolese. So we texted them, we sent them SMS asking them to register onto our platform using their voters' IDs, and then we started to distribute cash directly to them. So we were very proud to think that we were maybe the first and a country to distribute cash based solely on artificial intelligence.
And Cina, I'm sure there are people listening to this that are thinking, okay, let's do that in our country. So just share with us, what was the biggest obstacle or barrier along the way that others could learn from?
I would say that the first was we had issues with skills, because when we say that we used the payment platform, we were able to build very, very quickly in-house, because we could not actually, even if we wanted to do it through a public-private partnership, given the time frame that we had, which was very short, we wouldn't have been able to even select a company, because procurement processes are super long. So no way to contract in these circumstances. So that was number one. Number two was that because we used AI, we needed to process the data, and we didn't have the infrastructure in-house. And so that's why we worked a lot actually with the US, and we actually had to transfer data to have it analyzed elsewhere, and we didn't have in-house maybe the capabilities in terms of data scientists and others. And again, we didn't have the time because it was the pandemic and so on. So then the question for us was, okay, we have to do things fast, and let's make sure that after the pandemic, we have a sustainable methodology that we can implement. So the whole point was learning from what we were doing and making sure that afterwards we would set up the foundation to be sustainable in the future.
Fantastic. Now, audience members do know that you can ask questions to clarify, to comment, both at the end and after each speaker. So any quick question of clarification for Minister Lawson? Yes.
Can I go ahead?
Yes.
So I think my question is, how do you manage politics not try to consult for the government. We're trying to design a robust
Great.
security program. But
Let's take that.
politics was a lot.
How do you manage the politics? Other people in the cabinet that don't want it to happen, those who prefer the old ways of doing things?
Yeah, so there's the politics from the government standpoint, I mean, within the government, and the politics from the citizens' standpoint. The citizens were very happy because they received cash, right? So everybody was super enthusiastic and so on. From the government side, we had two types of people, very supportive people on the one hand, and then groups of people we call the legacy people, who didn't really trust the technology, didn't really, they were afraid of this failing. But the president himself was supportive, and he was the one who said, let's do it, and let's make sure that it's quick and efficient. So I guess that after the support of the president, obviously everybody was aligned, and we were able to make it happen. But right now, 2025, fast forward, with the help of the World Bank, we received an additional funding to make sure that we would scale this methodology. So now even people who used to be, reluctant in embracing this type of change have agreed to adopt it. So all the social protection ministries within Togo are now implementing this methodology.
Fantastic. Achim Steiner, you're head of the United Nations Development Programme. One of the first things you did as administrator was create these wonderful labs to learn and to innovate and transform. But when you hear the story of Togo, how is it that in the UNDP, how does that feel and look as you try to help countries do this?
Well, I think listening to this story just shows how often every day across the world the future is being invented. And I think when you lead an organization as large as UNDP and born out of a tradition that you are a bringer of knowledge and ideas, it takes a degree of reimagination to say, actually, the future is being invented in the very ecosystem in which we are a partner. So I remember when you began in the midst of COVID to put this platform in place. We immediately knew about it because we have a team in Togo, and we were struggling with many countries at the time, first of all, to do a socioeconomic assessment. Within 3 months in 120 countries, what was the impact, what were the means, what were the pivots that countries were able to pull off, and Togo popped right to the top of the list. So I think the story, COVID specific and, in a sense, cash transfer specific, speaks to what I think development is all about today. How can we, first of all, recognize that in the 21st century, even if you are in a poor country, in a poor economy, there is an extraordinary potential to invent the future. And I want to give you a quote from a young Ghanaian who has never left me, because he was one of the winners of an award that we have put in place about working with technology. And he said to me, look, if I was in America and I was trying to do what I'm trying to do, I would go on Amazon and order all of the stuff. He was trying to actually build the first solar vehicle in Accra. I had to go to the waste dump of Accra to look for circuit boards, for wires and so on, and that's how I began to build this thing that then actually worked and became, a sort of cause célèbre. So to the more structural question, I think one of the interesting, and UNDP is an institution that principally and first and foremost is there to assist governments in identifying what are the development opportunities of the future, what decisions and choices do we need to make in today's world, and to be able to help them also to have the capacity to do so. We talk about a lot of technology, AI and digital. In many governments, as Tony Blair also said, there is very often a kind of lag. And the fact that you are one of the youngest ministers, I think, at the time in the ICT field also spoke to the fact that governments have to quickly open up.
And Achim, can I just ask you, you're working within the United Nations, which is not, on the whole, noted for its rapid transformation within itself. But within the UNDP, how easy is it to transform, to rewire the UNDP? And what have you learned during your time about that? What would you say to a successor UNDP head about the opportunities and barriers to rewiring the UNDP?
Well, first of all, let me take up the challenge. I actually think the UN is far more agile than many people give it credit for. We are often the people who, within 24 hours of a disaster, a conflict breaking out, are able to mobilize logistics across the planet, like virtually no one else. And I use that analogy because that's the extreme end. Actually, I found UNDP to be remarkably agile, partly because it's an institution that is decentralized. 95% of our staff are in country teams. They work in the ecosystem of that country. They are partners, often they are professionals, because most of our staff happen to be nationals, professionals from the country, who as part of a global network then become bridge builders, catalysts. But perhaps the simplest way in which I can describe is you have to set a direction. When digital emerged, UNDP, when I arrived, was literally an analog organization. But everybody could sense that digital was transforming government, governance, economies. You have to create a direction. You have to make it very clear that 2 years down the line, there is no digital illiteracy anymore in this organization if you want to be part of it. So that's the push factor. Then you liberate people. And the accelerator labs were precisely to create platforms in every country team where we employed 3 people who came from outside the institution, very unusual people with very unusual titles who never thought of working for the UN, but suddenly saw their future coincide with the platform we provided. And then you give them freedom to experiment. And it's extraordinary what happens. A large, and yes, you're right, 23,000 people in 170 countries is not exactly a sprinter. But I was surprised, and I'm baffled at how quickly an institution becomes literate, because it can find around it so many examples. And part of UNDP's work is to connect and to help capacities that governments need. But we also have to learn from the private sector. And if you allow me one last comment, just walking through Davos here. AI is everywhere, and obviously every year needs a theme. What I sometimes find intriguing is that the AI narrative of Davos is sometimes somewhat removed from the narrative that I hear in the rest of the world, because it's not just companies who have ideas and products that they wish to offer and sell in a market. It is actually the interface between government, companies, markets, education systems, universities. We often pretend that all of this is just a commercial and business value proposition. Actually, much of the fundamental research is publicly funded. The people who come out of universities are often the products of government-funded education systems. So there is a story of government going upstream. The education syllabus, for example. If you don't introduce digital literacy in school, then your next school-leaving generation cannot be very effective in a digital economy. Right through to the other end, which is what we will hear, I'm sure, more about, and the UAE is practicing it, and many others, how the applications then create entirely new economic trajectories, new markets, new platforms. And again, government needs to be an enabler and a regulator. And I think it is this moment in time where, if you go to China today, if you go to India, often, internationally not seen as one of the giants on artificial intelligence and digital, and yet it is the country that pulled off perhaps the greatest story in history in terms of creating a digital identity, creating a digital platform, where government and the private sector were almost in a twin formation to make that happen.
Thank you, Achim. So we've got get the authority to move fast and bring others along. We've got decentralized help, if you're agile, and educate people, educate your citizens and staff and those they're working with to be digitally literate. Let me move now to the minister from the United Arab Emirates and secretary to the government there as well. What the Emirates are doing is pretty astonishing, frankly. In Abu Dhabi, just a couple of months ago, one of your ministers said, one of the other ministers said, the role of government is to design a future that gives citizens hope. And I thought, wow, I don't often hear governments saying that. But what your government has achieved at breakneck speed is astonishing. Share with us how.
Good afternoon, everyone. You know that as everyone knows, that the rapid pace of the advanced technologies, rise of AI, rise of the citizen expectations make that modernization is not now, it becomes as a luxury. Actually, it becomes a necessity and for governments to be relevant, competitive, and effective. And that's why in the UAE, we embarked the modernization journey very early, 2 decades ago, where we started with the digital transformation, mobile and smart services, AI strategy 2031, And that is resulted that we have now in the UAE, 99% of our government service is digitally transformed. We have 90% satisfaction among our citizens. We have 100% of our citizens living in UAE have a digitally unified number where they can access most of the government services and some of the private services. We have also did a federal saving, which is around $4 billion US. We are, our ITC infrastructure is ranked 1 globally, and we are also ranked 1 globally on the internet speed. We are 3rd globally in the attracting AI talent. We are 4th globally in the number of foundation of AI models released. However, UAE government knows that modernization is not about only digital transformations. One of the cornerstone of the modernizations is also to make reform in your legislative system that affect most of the sector. And that's why, there's where I come from, okay? And that's why we have a leadership vision of the UAE, starting from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed and Sheikh Mohammed and the cabinet, that we need to do a massive reform for all our regulations. I think, Professor Wood, you know that there was a lot of visions. We need to attract talented people. We need to attract entrepreneurs. So we need them to be living in the UAE. It's not about attracting them alone, but actually to make them living in the UAE. And that's why we have to do the massive reform in our regulations in all the aspects. Actually, in 4 years, the target was you have to work 5 years to change most of our regulations and update it, and that's why in 4 years, 80% of the federal laws in the UAE has been changed. More than 40 laws in the UAE has been repealed. We have also introduced 30 new laws in the UAE. I give you some of the examples. For example, we have introduced a law for e-commerce so we can manage and regulate how the people can do their business digitally. And we have now more than 24,000 companies in this area. We have also a federal regulation to regulate the virtual asset and the cryptocurrency. And that's the aim of it, of how to protect the investor in this emerging field. We have also revamped our visa and residency system, and we introduced a golden visa of 10 years. And the aim of it, of how to attract the entrepreneur, expert, the scientists, the talents, to come and contribute to our economy. And we have 100% foreign ownership of the companies in the UAE. I think before a day before, our Minister of Economy, he has announced that we have more than 1.2 million company has been registered in the UAE, and there is more, 300,000 is coming on. We have revamped our court system to be having specialized court for specialized subjects, speaking in English, so we can, our investors and our talents, they can, if they have any dispute, there is a court for them, so they can speak fluently in this type of court. Beside this one, we have also introduced UAE legislative platform, which is very friendly. All the laws of the UAE, Arabic and English, is available on that platform, free of charge, open for the whole world. It is AI designed. You can search for any law in the UAE through that platform. Plus,
and Minister, I'm going to interrupt you for a moment, because you've created a dazzling prospect for us. I mean, it's both dazzling and depressing, because what about all other countries? You know, 4 billion in savings, satisfied citizens, investors and experts coming to the Emirates, and it's all, and that's what you can observe with your own eyes when you come to the Emirates. You've highlighted for us that vital to that has been a clear vision of where you're going, Sheikh Mohammed's vision and his authority behind it, rather like the president of Togo saying, we're going to do this and I give you authority to do it. But Cina told us about the legacy people, or in some countries they call them the dinosaurs, but those, you know, who have been in the system a long time and want to keep doing things the way they did. What did you do with those people in the Emirates? Because when I go to the Emirates, the government seems incredibly young. Like, did you retire everybody? Did you?
We have actually, from time to time, we have a cabinet reform, okay? But the most important is in the cabinet, the prime minister with his minister, they are all aligned to one vision. And we have also in the General Secretariat, and we have other tools for the cabinet to monitor that everyone is doing his job, and we report back to the cabinet what's going on in any of the vision that is being issued or announced. And that's why we don't have that legacy of people, because you know the vision, either you cope with the change that you have, or we say to you thank you and you can do anything else in somewhere else. This is the vision in the UAE, and you have seen it and you have heard about it, and there is a lot of reforms. Every 2 years we do a reform. Sometimes we introduce new ministries also in the UAE to tackle new files that has not been tackled before, or we need to tackle a file that we need some focus on it, and that's why we bring new ministers in the cabinet.
Brilliant.
Let me give you one example also.
Actually, I'm going to come and just check with the audience. Did you have a question either for Achim or Maryam al-Hammadi?
Okay.
Achim Steiner or Hammadi? And I'm going to come back to your example, but I'm going to first move to Tom Siebel, a computer science and brilliant entrepreneur who founded and built C3 AI. Tom, we were talking earlier about the enormous benefits of the kind that your company delivers to companies as well as to public agencies that can transform what public agencies do. I'm going to ask you a slightly different question as the computer scientist in you, because another technologist, Dario Amodei, earlier today said the risk of AI, and this isn't governments deploying AI, this is the risk of AI for governments, is that AI will stabilize and strengthen autocratic governments and destabilize and weaken democracies. He wasn't saying that'll happen, he was saying that's a risk. So what I'd love to hear is there a way to deploy or develop AI that will strengthen democracy, that will strengthen the way that citizens can hold their governments to account?
Well, I mean, there is no question that we will be using generative AI, particularly generative AI. And I think probably globally by the end of this decade as the primary means by which we are delivering government services. And, you know, I'm not certain this strengthens autocrats and destabilizes democracies. But when we get into the delivery of government services, when we get into whether it's benefits programs, whether it's public health, whether it's education, I mean, these services will be delivered, okay, at higher quality, okay, with greater accuracy, into the hands of more satisfied constituents, okay, at lower cost through generative AI. Hard stop. And you know, when we look at the rules and regulations associated with these benefits programs that we have, be it the National Health Service in the UK or the Affordable Care Act in the United States, or you know, name the program and name the country, these are, you know, the scale of the rules, regulations, and issues associated with these programs are biblical in scale, okay, and they are, you know, basically impenetrable and inaccessible to our constituents. Now, with generative AI and on the device that everybody, you know, has and will have in their pocket, I mean, you're going to be able to ask, you know, any question about any benefit program, Pell Grant, NHS services, Affordable Care Act, how do I get into the Naval Academy, okay, whatever it is, and you'll be able to ask the question in 133 languages, and you'll be able to get in whatever language you ask the question is, you'll get the answer, and it'll be immediate, and it'll be right the first time, rather than you waiting 41 minutes in some call center to get the wrong answer. So this is going to, fundamentally change the way that we deliver services, and I mean, the world will be a better place. I don't, does AI, is this, are there risks associated with AI as the way that it will be used by autocrats, as the way it will be used by bad actors? Okay, will it be used to undermine democracy? Absolutely. I mean, this is not a future, it's being used today. I mean, anybody involved in Brexit? Anybody pay attention to the 2016, 2020, 2024 election in the United States of America? I mean, people, this is happening today. We don't have to wait for it to happen tomorrow. But I think, net, the services that government deliver will be delivered more efficiently, lower cost, at greater accuracy, into the hands of more satisfied constituents. And this happens hard stop.
Mm-hmm. And so what we do know is that actively to hold a government to account, doesn't matter if it's a democratic or non-democratic government, you need active citizens. And I guess one of the arguments would be that AI makes life so easy for so many people that they lose their agency, they lose their intentionality. They become an amorphous mass. Is there a way, do you see an AI that's emerging that could strengthen people's intentionality, that could strengthen their agency, that could make them active citizens that really do note what their governments are doing and hold them to account?
I'm afraid I just don't understand how it makes us more helpless, okay, and how it reduces our agency. Let's look at the future, okay? The future, and not very distant future, okay? We will have 6 billion people, okay, with the entire knowledge of mankind, okay, available in their pocket. Okay, we will have 6 billion people who are polymaths. Okay, they are like Voltaire, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and they will have instantly available everything there is to know about healthcare, agriculture, animal husbandry. Okay, we're effectively, raising the IQ of the planet Earth, by a substantial amount. Now, there's a direct correlation between that, okay, and productivity. Mm-hmm. There's a direct correlation between productivity and GDP growth, at global scale. So, I mean, think about that. Think about 6 billion polymaths on the planet Earth who have immediately available the entire universe of human knowledge immediately at their fingertip. People, this happens. And I realize everybody wants to bemoan, all of the downside and terror associated with AI and how your smart refrigerator is going to take over your house. I get it. Okay, but there are some very, very optimistic outcomes, and this one I just told you does happen.
Yeah, and your advice to governments on, so some people in private companies, their answer on advice to governments is just like hire us, which isn't, But what would your advice be to governments, that helps them decide how to actually benefit in the ways how to become the seamless, frictionless, trusted deliverer to their citizens?
Honestly, I would embrace the private sector. Mm. I mean, I would embrace the private sector in the UK. I would embrace the private sector in the UAE. I would embrace the private sector in the United States. And because I think, this is where, I'm a strong believer. This is where innovation comes from. This is where creativity comes from. And I would embrace the private sector, and I would take advantage of what they have to offer in government and government services and protecting us from one another and protecting us from government.
Thank you. So you've heard from today's panel, you need vision, you need authority, you need a skilled workforce, you need a good collaboration with the private sector to help you. What are your questions or comments? I can take a quick couple before we close. Yes.
Hello, my name is Rashid from Ghana. We're currently living in Germany and in the UK. Just a quick observation, and could probably be open to a bit of controversy here. What seems clear, we've talked about vision and authority, but what seems, if you look at the correlation between countries in the world today who are advanced in technology, and also the longevity of the governance in those countries, there seems to be some sort of correlation. And if you look at what is happening in the UAE, we have the leadership and that long-term planning. Is there a question here that when we talk about rewiring, are we just talking about surface level, or do we need to really go back and rip out systems and do it again? I'm talking about the tenor of governance.
That's brilliant. Can democracies have long-term plans and stick to them? Great. We've got 2 minutes left, so very quick other remark.
Yeah, I'm a JD professor from University of Maryland. Question will be to the execution, top-down or bottoms-up? Both directions are important. Top-down, what's the benefit for the leadership? Bottoms-up, what's the membership, leadership benefit for the citizens? I believe you can get the very quick finding whether people like or not if you have a technology. In the meantime, you can deliver transparent services to the people who really want to need it. So how should we do it?
Brilliant. One word each from the panel. Just one word to leave the audience with. Cina?
With regards to
One word.
On rewiring their government.
I would say leadership.
Leadership?
I'll pass for a moment.
Brilliant.
One word I have to reduce.
Minister
Is one
Hammadi.
word?
Yep.
Well, I will say the people, the investor needs plus the leadership. We have to make that balance between them.
This leadership vision, bottom up and top down. Tom?
I'll give you 2 words or a few. But I think this is about free markets, and I think it's about open and democratic societies.
So competitive companies, open democratic societies. Achim?
Society leads technology, not always technology leading society. Just to give a little bit of a, let's say,
Society
aperture.
leading technology. I want to close this panel by pointing to the World Economic Forum's GovTech network. They've done some excellent reports, which I really recommend to you, that synthesize some of these issues. The Global GovTech Center in Berlin has been formulated by the World Economic Forum to pool this expertise. I'm sure you can speak to Kelly at the end of this panel if you're in the room. If you're not in the room, go to the website, find the reports. They're incredibly interesting and useful. We've got some fantastic guidance from today's panel at breakneck speed that gives us a checklist for asking ourselves, are our governments on track? Do they have a vision? Do they have the people? Do they have the authority? Are they getting on with it? Are they collaborating with the private sector? Can you join me in thanking the panelists for such great wisdom?